My husband and I kept a secret in our basement for 52 years. The day a developer demolished our shed without permission, everyone found out what was there. My husband was arrested and sentenced to life in prison, and that led to something we can never take back. The day the developer's workers brought an excavator to our shed without a single knock, the earth remembered what we asked it to forget. I was making soup for my granddaughter when the first scrape of metal on wood made the kitchen glass rattle. There early, my husband called from the basement stairs, but there was that subtle note in his voice I recognized the night our first child was born, the note of a man ready for a challenge. By the time I reached the yard, the shed roof sagged like paper, and 3 men in bright vests waved away my cries as if I were a crow on a fence. "Building permit," one of them said, tapping his clipboard. "Setback violation, demolish." "This barn's been here since 1973, but I said. "Don't touch it." They were touching it. The bucket was breaking through the floorboards, and the first thing that came up was the smell. Musty dampness, iron, the breath of the past, turning every hair on my arms to needles. The youngest worker leaned forward curiously. Then he screamed. I didn't look. Instead, I looked at my husband. He approached me in his expensive cardigan, the same one he wore to church, court, and funerals, his hands folded so neatly I wanted to unclench them. "Earl?" I said. He didn't answer. He watched the workers retreat, the foreman clumsily dialing the number, the yellow ribbon unfurling on our lawn, as if it had always been waiting for this wind. We kept a secret on this land for 52 years. We wallpapered it, raised our sons on it, lit birthday candles on it, while it lay beneath our feet like a second foundation. We promised each other it was the only way out. But secrets are heavy, even concrete sweats. A woman with a belt around her neck and a stern expression appeared at the fence, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. "Ma'am," she said, "you need to stay." "Okay," I replied. Then I stepped forward. "You didn't have a permit to demolish our barn. I have letters disputing that permit." "Whatever you have," she said, "you can show the detectives." The officers lunged at Earl. He didn't resist. He touched my elbow as they passed. The man was brushing crumbs off a table that no longer belonged to him. "Judy," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked, even though I knew. "For not stopping a young man in 1973 when he staggered into our yard with a knife, wearing a mask and smelling of cheap beer. For mistrusting a system that had already rejected my application. For the bad decision that followed the panic that bound us together forever. For the basement that became a workshop of regrets. For how we learned to speak, filling the void in the world." At the station, a detective with tired eyes asked me if I understood what had been discovered. I nodded. "Do you understand?" I asked. "Why your release was signed on a Friday after closing by a man who doesn't live at this address?" His pen froze. My hands were still shaking, but not from shock. Rage is a cold river. Once you step into it, it will carry you wherever it wants. They accused Earl. They called it murder. They called it life. The headline used our last name as a curse. Neighbors made faces at me, the kind strangers wear at wakes, and said things like, "If you need anything," which meant, "We're terrified, you know." How could the earth swallow up half a century and return it to that one day I forgot to lock the gate? How could the city forget my registered letters, remembering only the developer's schedule? The night after the sentencing, I made tea in the quiet house and set out the boxes I had promised myself never to open, the copies of letters stamped, received and ignored, photographs of the shed before it was a legal problem, the contractor's business card with the wrong phone number, the survey map with the property line nudged like a dishonest ruler, and the single Polaroid that had saved our lives once and cost us everything after. I placed the Polaroid face down. It is a terrible thing to see your own fear preserved. 52 years is a long time to practice being underestimated. While they celebrated their verdict, I made a list. Names, dates, bank accounts, a city seal that did not match. The developer's nephew, who had shaken the councilman's hand at the summer fair, the woman with the lanyard whose eyes had slid off my proof as if it were a smudge. If they could dig up my past without permission, I could excavate theirs with it. I have lost my husband to a courtroom and my shed to a machine. I am old, but I am not finished. The earth is not the only thing that can be compelled to give back what it has taken. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. On the third night after the sentencing, I pulled the boxes from the attic and lined them on the dining table like letters waiting for a train that never comes. I didn't turn on the chandelier. Too bright, too cheerful. I worked by the thin lamp that used to sit beside our youngest's homework, the bulb warm, the cone of light small enough to make everything inside it matter. Item 1. The certified letters I'd sent to the city when the orange notices first grew like fungus on our fence. Objection to demolition, I'd written. Disputed boundary. I had return receipts someone in the permit office signed, Lopez, but the demolition order, the one they'd waived as if it were a holy relic, bore a different name and a Friday date stamped after the office closed. I set the letters in a neat stack and clipped them. Item 2. The survey map. It showed our property line running straight, then bending as if the draftsman's hand had hiccuped, the deviation exactly where the developer's new road wanted to slice. I laid a transparent ruler against the angle. The line didn't match the older map Earl had kept for taxes. To nudge a boundary is to steal a life 1 inch at a time. Item 3. A torn brochure from the developer's last open house with a smiling family and a tagline that felt like insult. A new life on clean ground. Clean. I traced the letters with my thumb until the paper wore thin. Item 4. The Polaroid. I left it face down. If I kept my fingers on its back long enough, the heat showed a thumbprint I could pretend was someone else's. I made tea and wrote names, the woman with the lanyard, Melissa something, the foreman, the developer's project manager who had parked his expensive car across my driveway the week before and smiled as if he were doing me a favor by existing, the councilman who cut the ribbon on the model home with a laugh like clinking glass, the permit clerk, Lopez, the unknown man who signed after hours, the detective with tired eyes, Mason. In the morning, I baked a pie. Rage needs a lid. People underestimate an old woman with a pie. I wrapped it in a towel and walked 2 blocks to the little storefront where a young reporter rented space. She'd ambushed me once for a reaction shot outside the courthouse. She had freckles and too much courage for a girl her mother probably still worried about. I set the pie on her cluttered desk, and when she looked up with surprise, I said, "If you want a story, you'll put your phone away and help me read." Her name was Lila. She took the pie to a low table with mismatched chairs, as if we were about to start a book club. I opened the box with the letters and maps, the copies and notes, the ink-smudged timeline I'd written at 2 in the morning. "You're not supposed to talk while appeals are pending," she said quietly. "Then don't talk," I said. "Look." She did. She slid a finger along the survey angle, leaned close to the Friday stamp, studied the scrawl of a signature that didn't match any clerk in the directory. "Where did you get all this?" she asked, not unkindly. "I listen. I watch. And unlike your editor, I have time. 52 years. Do you know what you can learn by not being invited to meetings?" She smiled, then sobered. "Mrs. Halston, Hale." "Mrs. Hale. If I print this, they will come after me. And you—" "They already came," I said, "with a backhoe." We worked until the pie cooled. She made calls from the alley where the connection was better and the smokers congregated. I wrote down the answers. When the sun slid behind the hardware store, she sat back and stretched. "I can't promise anything," she said, "but I can promise to ask the right questions on the record and the wrong ones off. I can file public records requests that don't go in your name, and if someone tries to bully me, I can put a camera in his face." "Good," I said. "Start with Lopez." She called the permit office. Lopez was on leave. "Family emergency," the receptionist said. "No, I don't know when he'll be back." Lila raised an eyebrow. "Convenient." "Or frightening," I said. That night, I dreamt of concrete sweating in summer heat, of a shovel hitting a pipe that wasn't a pipe, of a young man's breath fogging cold air as he whispered, "Don't tell." and my husband whispering back, "I won't," while looking at me. On Sunday, my granddaughter buzzed the doorbell with the impatience only 6-year-olds can afford. I let her in and watched her run to the kitchen where she knew I kept the good cookies. My daughter followed, tight-lipped. "Mom," she said, "you can't talk to reporters." The lawyer said. The lawyer put a suit jacket on a problem and called it handled, I said. The lawyer can wait his turn. Her eyes filled the way mine used to when I was her age, and my mother made choices I didn't understand. "He's Dad," she said. "He's my father." "He is my husband," I said, "and he is not the only person in this story." What does that mean? It means we live in a city where a developer can erase your fence with a permit you never got to see. It means men in hard hats can dig up your life and walk away whistling because the paper told them they could. I put a cookie in my granddaughter's hand. "Sweetie, go draw me a house with a fence that no one touches." She did, humming, as my daughter and I argued softly in the doorway, like people afraid to wake a sleeping dog that might not be asleep at all. By Tuesday, Lila had a copy of the after-hours signature, not a copy from the office. Those doors stayed closed to her, but a photo from a clerk who'd grown up with her brother. And remembered the way she'd used to lend him notes. "Keep me out of it," he said in a message she didn't show me, but described with careful vagueness. But look at the W. The W in William started sharp and finished lazy, like a man who begins the day with resolve and ends it over a drink. Lila printed it large. "Your councilman's name is William Carr," she said. "His W looks exactly like this when he signs birthday cards." "Councilmen don't sign permits," I said. "They don't," she agreed. "Unless they do." Detective Mason called me the same afternoon. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "I need you to stop stirring up attention. It makes my job harder." "You have a job?" I asked. "Because from where I sit, you had a backhoe do it for you." Silence. Then, "I read your letters. I believe you sent them. I can't promise any of this will help your husband." "I didn't ask for promises." "What did you ask for?" "To be treated like a person whose fence is not an invitation. And for you to look at the man who signed after hours." "I looked," he said. "He says it's a rubber stamp. The signature is auto-penned. Is his W lazy, detective?" He sighed. "Mrs. Hale, our lab is busy with the remains from your yard." I closed my eyes. "You call him remains now?" I said. 52 years ago, he was a boy with a mask and a knife who said my husband would never be a real man if he called the police. He had a left ear pierced before boys wore earrings. He had a small scar under his lip. He smelled like metal and beer. And he laughed when I told him my father was a crane operator, as if machines could love us back. "Why didn't you call us?" he asked, but softly. "We did," I said. "They said we were dramatic newlyweds." I didn't tell him about the panic after the boy lunged, the wild flailing that ended in a crack, and a stunned quiet broken only by the neighbor's dog. I didn't tell him about the hours after, or the shovel, or the pact made with shaking hands. I didn't tell him how we had planned to turn ourselves in the next day and then watch the world keep moving as if it had no interest in our broken apology. The truth is not a straight line. It's a field of tall grass where you can lose yourself if you stop paying attention. At Lila's suggestion, I went to the county records office with a cane I didn't need, wearing my church cardigan and my patient face. People hold doors for old women in cardigans. Inside, a clerk with a coffee stain on his tie recognized my name and brightened like a man who had a story for his wife. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "I saw your husband on TV. Terrible." "Terrible," I agreed and slid a tray of brownies across the counter. "I'm cleaning out my files and wanted duplicates for my children. Could you help me find the original property description from 1972? He could. He did. He also printed a memorandum I had not seen, a variance granted in 2020 to adjust setbacks for community development. There was a note in the margin, hand-scribbled, expedite per WC. The W swooped. The C rolled. I smiled at the clerk and gave him the corner brownie, the one with the extra crisp. On the way out, I stopped in the hallway where a corkboard held faded notices no one read, community watch meetings, a missing cat with eyes like coins, and a flyer for a charitable gala hosted by the developer. Special guest, Councilman William Carr. Address printed in elegant type. The ballroom at a hotel that used to be a courthouse. I ironed my blouse. I found a necklace I hadn't worn since Earl took me dancing when the boys were small and a sitter could be paid with ice cream. I pinned my hair the way my mother taught me when she wanted me to look respectable enough to be underestimated. Lila met me there in a dress with pockets deep enough for a phone and a recording device. "We are not supposed to be here," she whispered as we walked past a cluster of men sampling oysters. "We are exactly supposed to be here," I said. "We are taxpayers." The ballroom swelled with laughter and glass. The developer stood on a dais and spoke about revitalization and new life, as if he had discovered verbs. When the applause ended, I moved toward the edge of the crowd and planted myself near the exit, where the powerful must funnel past ordinary people on their way to the next thing they own. "Mrs. Hale," a voice said behind me. Councilman Carr. He had the tan of a man who plays golf for charity on weekdays and rides in parades on weekends. He had read Lila's first cautious column, questions surrounding permit process in controversial demolition, and taken offense. He smiled at me as if we were at church. "I'm sorry about your husband." "I'm sorry about your scribbles," I said. His smile faltered. Lila's hand warmed against my sleeve, a warning. "The permit office handles signatures," he said. "I don't know what you think you saw." "I saw a man lazy with his W&C, I said. "I saw a line that bent where it had been straight for 50 years. I saw a developer who brings oysters to a room while my kitchen floor still smells like dirt." "Please lower your voice," he said. "Or what?" I asked. "You'll move my dining room 2 inches to the left and tell me it was always there?" He leaned in. "Be careful, Mrs. Hale. People think grief makes them brave. Grief makes them sloppy. I have been careful," I said. "For 52 years. We left with a picture Lila took of his hand as he gestured wildly to a donor, his fingers splayed in delight. The W&C on the cocktail napkin he signed matched the permit, a small thing. Napkins get thrown away. But not if you ask the bartender to keep it for a scrapbook, not if the bartender's sister had baby shoes I'd knitted when she couldn't afford new ones back when we were all young and forgot to write down the ways we'd helped each other. Detective Mason's call came 2 mornings later. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "I can't discuss details, but the coroner's report could complicate the case." "Complicate it for whom?" I asked, heart hammering a beat I hadn't heard since dancing. "For your husband," he said. "In his favor," I sat. "Go on." "The fracture pattern on the skull suggests a fall. There's bruising consistent with a struggle near a set of stairs, not a planned blow." He cleared his throat. "There's also residue under the nails indicating the young man was holding a knife whose handle had paint on it, a cheap black enamel. It matches paint chips found in your basement from the same decade." "So," I whispered. "So a jury might consider self-defense. If the district attorney is willing." He didn't have to say the second half, "if the district attorney isn't having his re-election party paid for by a developer's cousin." "Thank you," I said. After we hung up, I pressed my palms together until they hurt. Self-defense is not a magic wand. It doesn't undo 52 years or the panic of a spring night when you were 22 and the world taught you what the word alone really meant. But it is a door. I could see light under it. Lila wrote 2 more pieces. The second carried more teeth. "Signatures in question," it read. And inside the print, the napkin photograph, the councilman called her editor. The piece still printed. The developer's lawyer sent a letter that said words like defamation, as if speaking them out loud could change a photograph's ink. On a gray Thursday, I took the bus to the edge of town where the old courthouse was being converted into lofts. The construction paused when a judge realized you can't sell a building while you're suing the company that bribed you for its bones. I found the foreman leaning against a metal barrier, drinking coffee, watching a crane sleep. "You were at my house?" I said. He turned. "Lady, if you're here to yell, get in line. I'm here to listen, I said. Who told you to start early? He snorted. The order came from upstairs. Phone call said the neighbors were away on vacation and there'd be less fuss. We get that all the time. People don't like to watch their wood get splinters. I wasn't away, I said. I was making soup. He shrugged. Look, we have a schedule. If we don't keep it, we lose the bonus. What bonus? The one the developer pays if we hit targets. He calls it community peace. Fewer complaints, more quiet, we get a bump. It's all above board, probably. I thanked him and left, heart thudding. A bonus for silence. If you write it down and call it efficiency, men will clap. At home, I printed every photograph I had of the shed. Summer picnics, a Christmas when the snow slid off the roof in a sheet, and the boys screamed with delight. Earl in a ridiculous hat, painting the door blue because the birds like blue. I wrote the year in the corner of each and made a little altar on the dining table. If anyone wanted to say the building was a nuisance, let them look at 52 years of ordinary life and tell me it didn't deserve a permit hearing at the very least. Detective Mason knocked at dusk. May I come in? He asked, hat in hands like the old movies. You already did, I said, by accident. Come in the proper way? He sniffed the air. Your house smells like history. It smells like lemon oil, I said. Sit. Tell me why you look as if your shoes weigh more than your legs. He sat. He told. The district attorney did not want to back down from the headline that had made him look decisive. The councilman was furious. The developer had hosted a fundraiser and framed himself as a citizen under attack by people who can't accept change. But something else had happened. Lopez, the permit clerk, had turned in his resignation. In his exit email, screen captured by someone with a long memory and a short tolerance for lies, he had written, I will not be your pen. The email leaked. Lila printed it with the clerk's name redacted and 3 paragraphs quoting a senior city staffer about orders from above. The city rattled like dishes in a truck hitting a pothole. It's not enough, Mason said, rubbing his eyes, but it's movement. Movement makes cracks, I said. Cracks let light in. He looked at the photographs on my table and then at the boxes with my careful labels. Why did you keep all this? He asked softly. Because someday someone would need it, I said. Because I trusted the future more than the present. Because my husband asked me to and because I got good at hiding things. I met his gaze. And because if I threw it away, it all became a story I told instead of a thing I could hold. He nodded. On his way out, he hesitated at the doorway. Mrs. Hale, he said, there's one more thing. We found fibers under the young man's jacket that match a sweater not sold in this state at the time. We traced the store. It's next to a bar where someone remembers a group of boys coming in that night to celebrate teaching a married woman a lesson. Names are hard after 52 years, but not impossible. I gripped the back of the chair. The room tilted, then steadied. Get their names, I said. Get them whether they remember or not. The second hook of my middle act arrived, disguised as a condolence call. He had an old voice that creaked like stairs. Mrs. Hale, my name is Arthur Crandall. I used to sell insurance. I read about your husband. I'm calling because I think the young man in your yard might have been my nephew. I sat down. He continued. My sister ran a boarding house near the plants. In the spring of '73, her boy went out with the wrong crowd. He came home with his face cut and a new earring, said he was done with all of them. Then he disappeared. We told the police. Nothing. My sister died thinking he'd gone west. He paused. We found his things when we sold her house. A little tin with photographs. He had a new tattoo, an anchor with initials, H and W, like he wanted to be a sailor but never saw the ocean. He was a fool, but he wasn't evil. People can be both, I said. I know, he said. I've been both. His breathing rasped softly. If my nephew did what they say, I'm sorry. If he didn't, I'm sorry anyway. But I want you to have the photographs. Maybe they help your husband. Maybe they help me sleep. I took the bus to his apartment. He lived among books older than he was. He handed me a tin that had held mints and thyme. Inside, faded pictures of boys in jackets leaning against a chain link fence, one with his arm slung around the other like a man claiming land. On the back of one, the initials H plus W inked messy. The boy we had buried wore a sneer like armor. He was not a monster, he was a child who had learned the wrong lessons. My hands shook anyway. "Thank you," I said. "I'm sorry for your sister." "Me too," he said. "I hope your husband comes home." "Me too," I whispered, and meant it so fiercely I could have lifted a car. The district attorney announced a review. The word review is the bureaucrat's apology. Lila called it a crack. Mason called it fuel. I called it the first breath I'd taken since the backhoe. In the meantime, the city council scheduled a hearing on the permit process. I wore my cardigan and pearls and took a seat in the front row where my knees would complain, which would keep me angry and awake. They called speakers. They called the developer's lawyer, who talked about streamlining. They called William Carr, who talked about constituent priorities. They called a woman from a neighborhood association who talked about the right to be heard. They did not call me. I stood anyway. "Mrs. the council president began. "Hale," I said into the microphone I wasn't supposed to use. "Judith Hale, I'm the one whose shed became your development's foundation for a narrative about progress. I'm the one whose husband is wearing a jumpsuit while you all eat oysters." "Mrs. Hale," the president warned. "You will let me finish," I said, and something in my voice made the room hold its breath. "You forgot my letters. You bent my line. You let a signature appear after hours with a W and a C that belonged to the man who now tells me to be careful with my grief. You call it process. I call it theft." People shifted. Lila's camera whirred softly. Mason stood in the back like a tree in a storm. William Carr looked at me the way men look at potholes, the kind they swear they'll fill and never do. "I kept everything," I said, "because I am a woman who learned the hard way that if I don't keep it, no one else will." I kept the return receipts. I kept photographs. I kept the napkin you signed. I kept my husband's love for 52 years under a cheaper roof than yours, and I will keep standing here until someone says the word that means you acknowledge what you did. "What word is that?" someone called, amused. "Wrong," I said. "Say wrong. Then fix it." The president cleared his throat. "The council thanks you for your comments," he said, and moved on. But the cameras had caught what I needed them to catch. Men pausing, women nodding, a city fidgeting, a councilman's mouth flattening like a coin. The next morning, Lila's headline made me flinch and then breathe. "Grandmother confronts city. Say wrong. Then fix it." Her editor had let her print the napkin. The bartender's sister had allowed her name. The developer's lawyer sent another letter. This one didn't threaten. It asked for a meeting. I chose the diner on Maple with the sticky menus and the coffee that tastes like mornings before you know what they will become. The developer came with a woman whose job was to occasionally laugh. He was younger than me by decades and older than decency by choice. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "let's be adults." "I have been one longer than you," I said. He laughed. She laughed. Mason had insisted on sitting 2 booths away with a newspaper held upside down. Lila pretended to drink a milkshake at the counter. "Here's my position," the developer said. "We followed the city's directive. If there was an error, it was theirs. But I am a community man. I hate that this has happened to you. I'd like to offer a settlement." "Settlement," I repeated. "For what?" "For the demolition. That you had no right to perform." He steepled his fingers. "We can debate the finer points, or we can solve the problem." "What's the number?" I asked, because I knew how to let men say what made them feel important. He named a number that would have thrilled me at 30 and insulted me at 74. "No," I said. "We can go higher." "Not high enough?" He spread his hands. "What do you want, Mrs. Hale?" "3 things," I said. 1, you fix the boundary and pay to rebuild what you tore down. In the same place, with your money and my choice of carpenter. 2, you return every bonus you paid for community peace as a donation to the city library because knowledge is the only thing that cleans ground. 3, you use your voice to correct what you said about people who can't accept change. You say, "We changed too fast and too quietly. We were wrong." He stared. The woman beside him stopped laughing. "You're asking me to kneel in public," he said. "I'm asking you to stand up straight," I said, "and to say the word." He left angry. He always would have. Men like him think saying wrong makes them smaller. It doesn't. It makes the room breathable. In the next booth, Mason folded his newspaper and looked at me with something like respect. "If he doesn't give you that," he said, "what's your next step?" "Juries don't like men who take advantage of grandmothers," I said. He smiled. "No, they do not." The district attorney blinked at the coroner's report and then blinked at his donors and picked blinking over eyesight. "We will consider these findings carefully," he told cameras, which is the same as saying, "We will wait and see if this matters to the people who vote." It did. Mothers pushed strollers past the courthouse. Retirees wrote letters. Someone made a sign that said, "Say wrong." It was not the sign I would have made, but it was a start. In late autumn, Lopez met Lila in a park. He was thinner, haunted. He had a toddler who kept dropping a ball and laughing. "The councilman signed on a Friday," Lopez said. "He called it convenience. He called it cutting ribbon without cutting corners, and we all laughed because we liked to pretend we were clever in the places we were weak." I looked away. I shouldn't have. "What do you want?" Lila asked. "My name kept out of it," he said. "And a city where permits follow rules. We can want both. We often can't have both." Lila printed the story without his name and with enough detail to make a reader's stomach twist. The council president announced an independent review. The developer announced a charity drive. The district attorney announced nothing. My granddaughter drew me another house, this one with a shed that had a rainbow roof because the birds like rainbows too. We taped it to the fridge. My daughter cried at my kitchen table and then brought me a sandwich and then cried again. Grief moves around a house like a cat. You feed it, you accommodate it, you pretend you control where it sleeps. We waited. We did not wait quietly. Lila requested old tapes from council meetings. She found a clip from 2020 where William Carr joked about keeping the trains running. The room laughed. He laughed too. "I'm not saying I signed any permits myself," he said, "but if I did, I'd sign them with a flourish." The W on his nameplate in front of him curved lazy and smug. The clip played on the news next to a photograph of my shed, and the anchor's voice had that tone people get when they are surprised by their own outrage. The next morning, someone draped a banner over the councilman's office building, a giant W crumpled into a question mark. The city finally remembered a word older than expedite: indict. It was not for murder. It was for forgery. It was for misuse of office. It was for a pattern of bending lines until they looked straight to the people who only glance. They booked William Carr. He did not wear his golf tan in the mugshot. He wore fear. Detective Mason came by that night with a paper bag of oranges and a smile that looked like it hurt his face. "I thought you might need vitamin C," he said. "And news." "Tell me the news," I said, ignoring the oranges. "The DA will move to vacate your husband's sentence," he said simply. "They will refile on a lesser count, manslaughter, with time served, citing new evidence of self-defense and procedural irregularities. He will come home." I ran my hand along the edge of the table to keep from falling. "Say it again," I said. "He will come home." He cleared his throat. "There will be conditions. He will have a parole officer. There will be people who believe what they want to believe about old bones. But the door is open when the door finally opened at the prison and my husband stepped through. He looked like a man who had walked across a desert. His hair had given up. His back had learned to make peace with beds that were not beds. His eyes were my husband's. He held my face in his hands and said, "Judy?" And I said, "Home." And for a moment, the past lay quiet. We did not get our shed back. We got something better and worse. We got a new foundation, A city clerk who wouldn't sign after 5, a council that met with the lights on, a developer who wrote a check large enough to rebuild the library's roof and small enough to still make him angry. We got letters, we got apologies, some real, most not. We got a carpenter named Ben who loved birds and built a small blue structure at the edge of our yard where my granddaughter now plays store, selling rocks to anyone who pays and leaves. We also got nights when Earl woke after midnight and stood at the basement door as if it were a cliff. We did what we thought would keep us alive, I told him. Oh, and then we lived. We planted a tree where the shed had been, a maple. My granddaughter named it House. In the fall, it burned red like a promise. In the spring, it misted green like forgiveness. I still have the Polaroid. I still keep the boxes. I still wear my church cardigan when I want to be underestimated. Sometimes I take the bus downtown and sit on a bench across from the building where the council meets. Men walk in, women walk in, they check their phones, they adjust their jackets. No one looks at the ground. I do. I look at the sidewalk and see what it hides and what it gives back when a machine descends, and an old woman refuses to swallow her story. If you are reading this because someone told you that progress doesn't wait, tell them it does, if you make it. If you are reading this because your son wants to move your fence, tell him to bring a level and a conscience. If you are reading this because your city erased your letter, send another, and bake a pie and walk it to a girl with freckles who understands how to turn paper into light. One evening, near winter, a man with a scar under his lip came to my gate. He was older than me by a decade, maybe. Hard years, weighing his shoulders. I knew him, he said without preamble, pointing at the earth. Back then. We were fools. I know, I said. We thought we were men, he said. We were boys who hurt people and laughed. I'm sorry, for what? I asked. For the things you did? Or for the ones you didn't stop? For both, he said, his eyes wet. For not teaching my sons better until it was too late to teach myself. I handed him an orange from Mason's bag. He held it like a thing he didn't deserve. You can sit, I said. But not long. The cold takes us faster these days. He sat. He ate the orange in the way that men in recovery do, slowly, as if tasting were a moral act. He told me names. He told me who moved west and who died and who became a pastor and who disappeared into a place people pretend not to see. He told me the boy in my yard had once cried when his dog ran away and had once broken a girl's arm because she laughed at his coat. He told me he still woke to the sound of a woman screaming. You're forgiven, I said, because sometimes the only justice left is the mercy you can stand to give. Not for him, for you. He nodded and stood and left. The gate creaked. I went inside where my husband was dozing in his chair, the television murmur a lullaby. I sat beside him and took his hand. He stirred but did not wake. I watched the news play a clip of William Carr entering a courtroom with his head down. I watched Lila's byline scroll and Mason's name spoken out loud by a man who mispronounced it. I watched our tree outside the window, still bones of branches against a sky that hadn't decided whether to snow. We don't always get the word we asked for. Sometimes we get a different one, just as old and just as heavy. We got home, we got wrong, we got fix, we got forgive, which we were not required to take but did, in pieces. 52 years is a long time to keep a secret in the ground. It is even longer to keep yourself quiet. I'm done with quiet. When people ask me now what I would say to anyone who finds a machine in their yard and a city at their door, I tell them this. Make tea, open the boxes, bake a pie, and look directly at the man who tells you to be careful with your grief. Then tell him to be careful with your line. And if he won't say the word, say it for him. And make sure someone with a camera is listening. Because the earth remembers. And so do I.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.